creating a new report, in addition to knowing the database tables and fields, it's also important to know the format of the report to be created. Using our earlier example, let's create a report based on customer information. When first starting Crystal Reports, Crystal displays this initialization screen. The actual screen appears differently with different versions of Crystal Reports. However, they all perform similar tasks. The version being used for this session is 11, or also known as XI. A Crystal Report can be created from scratch or from one of several wizards. Once you become familiar with Crystal, you may find it faster to create the report without the wizard. However, for the purpose of this session, the wizard will be used. Probably the most common report type, at least for Accpac reports, will be selecting the standard report wizard. Regardless of the Crystal Report version, the first window prompts for the data source connection. If reports have already been created using Accpac data, a list of previous data source connections will appear within the History section. If a new connection needs to be created, expand the Create New Connection screen. Crystal Reports can create reports from multiple database types, as shown here, whether it be from Excel, Access, or any other supported database. For Accpac, however, create the connection using ODBC. When the section is expanded, the existing data sources created on the workstation appear. Find the data source that matches the company for the report to be created, and press Next. If a user ID and password is assigned to the data source when it was created, enter that ID and password here. Assigning a password to the data source ID protects the accounting data from an unauthorized person generating reports and possibly getting access to sensitive data using Crystal Reports. Click Finish. Crystal displays the tables that exist for the selected database. Using the earlier example of wanting to create a report based on customer information, find the database table ARCUS and include it. The tables are displayed in alphabetical order. If another database table is needed, either select it now or add it later. For the purpose of this section, ARCUS will be the only table, at least for now. The next page of the wizard prompts for the database fields. Although many of the fields are recognizable, some field names are relatively cryptic, thus the reason for knowing about the UI Info tool discussed earlier. To be sure the correct fields are selected, highlight a field and click the Browse button to display the values saved with the field. Possibly by viewing the data stored in the field confirms that the field is the correct one. Select the customer number, customer name, address 1, city, state, province, and zip postal code. The order the fields are selected determines how they appear from left to right on the report. To make adjustments, use the up and down arrows to rearrange the fields. The fields can also be adjusted later when in the report design window. The next page of the wizard prompts how the report is to be grouped. Grouping determines how the records will be organized. For example, displaying those transactions belonging to a particular customer. A group becomes the primary sort of the report. For this report, group the report by the customer number, selecting ascending order. The next page determines if the report will be summarized. If numeric fields are selected, Crystal will automatically include them to be summarized so totals can be displayed within the report footer section, and optionally the group footer section if groups were defined. The customer ID field listed here is the group summarization. However, there are no numeric fields selected on the report yet. Summarization fields can be added at any time, either fields from the database tables or fields calculated from formulas. The next page of the wizard allows the report to display only specific data. For example, print only customers found in Canada. If this section is left blank, the report can be restricted to show specific data later. Click Next. The last page of the wizard is where the report template is selected. Some templates have built-in headers and title bars, colors, and many others. For the purpose of this session, select No Template. Crystal then displays the report in preview mode. Before getting into the details of each report section, it's important to discuss the report options. Within the File menu, select Options. The default settings for most options are sufficient, but it doesn't hurt to discuss those options that are extremely helpful when writing reports for Accpac data, in the event someone changed a setting from the default setting. The key fields on the Layout tab are rulers and grid lines. Typically, rulers are selected for both the design and preview screens. Grid lines may or may not be helpful because they have a tendency to make the screens cluttered. If grid lines are selected, specify the length between the lines in inches or centimeters. Moving to the Database tab, most of the default settings as shown here are sufficient. However, the Smart Linking field should be turned off. Although this can be very useful when designing some Crystal reports, it can cause confusion with Accpac. Smart Linking automatically links indexed fields together when multiple database tables are selected that contain the same field name. Although that may sound like a great advantage, there are some fields found in database tables that do not need to be linked just because they have the same name. The more fields that are linked between tables, the more report has to filter the data to print, causing the report to take longer to print. This doesn't mean that multiple fields should not be linked between database tables. In fact, quite the contrary. There are several reasons why multiple field links between database tables are required. If Smart Linking is selected, unwanted links can be removed. However, turning off the option, as shown here, indicates that linking the database fields together manually will be required. The Format Editing tab determines the font type and size when adding text fields, where the Font tab determines the same for each of the field types. The default settings on the Reporting tab are sufficient. However, there is a setting called Save Data with Report. This allows a preview of the data to be saved with the report when it is saved. Although this is helpful when accessing a report that may be linked to a database that does not exist on the workstation, it may not be desirable because someone receiving the report will see the data information existing on the report when it was last modified. Possibly the report information from the last time it was printed is not something that others should see. The Fields tab determines the specific default settings for each of the field types, such as suppress if the next record contains the same value. Keep in mind that these field settings can be changed on a field-by-field basis. The settings described here are only defaults. Crystal Reports contains a Design tab and a Preview tab. Although almost all changes to the report can be made from either tab, some changes will be easier to make from the Design tab, while other changes will be easier to make from the Preview tab. Selecting the Design tab, a report is broken down into several sections. Every report has at least a report header, page header, detail, report footer, and page footer section. If a group was selected, Crystal will display a group header and footer section. In this report, the group is based on customer number. Information existing in the report header and footer sections will print on the first or last page only, where information existing in the page header and footer section will print at the top or bottom of each page. The details section will be repeated for each record that matches the fields listed within the section. Information existing within the group header and footer sections will be repeated for each record that matches the fields in that section. For example, switching to the Preview tab, the group header and footer sections repeat for each customer number. It just so happens that the details section also contains the customer ID. Therefore, there is only one record per detail line. On the other hand, if the details section contained customer invoice information, the details section will be repeated for each invoice that matches the customer, because the report is currently grouped by customer. Available either in the Design or Preview tabs, rulers at the top and left side can be seen. In addition, the tab markers, these gray triangles, can be seen within the ruler. Tab markers identify the location of the fields that were placed on the report. Moving these tab markers will move the fields that are attached. To determine if a field is attached to a marker, look for the red corners on the field. A field can be linked to tab markers within columns, rows, or both. If a field is moved from the marker, the field is independent. To re-establish the link to the tab marker, select the field and move it towards one of the markers. Crystal will slightly pause, indicating it is linked if the Snap to Grid choice is selected within the Options screen. To move a field, move the tab marker attached to the field and not the field individually. This way, the field title, the field, and any field footer information will all move together and always line up with one another. To move a field from one section to another, click and drag it. For example, this report shows the customer name field within the details section. Possibly, you want to have the customer name field up in the group header section next to the customer number field. Because the customer number is located within the group header and the details section, remove the customer number field from appearing in the details section. There is no reason for it to be duplicated. The large bold horizontal lines between each section indicate the length of that section. Expanding or reducing a section will cause the report components to print either farther away or closer together. For example, increasing the length of the details section and then previewing the report, notice the fields are now farther apart. The length of a field can also be increased or decreased. The zip postal code field, for example, doesn't require as much space. Select the field and grab the corner to reduce the size. On the other hand, other fields, like the customer name field, may require more space. Again, grab the corner and this time increase the size. Performing these actions may cause fields to overlap or be truncated. Take each field independently to line the fields up. It may be necessary to change the margins, the paper size, or switch from portrait to landscape mode for the fields to appear correctly. Be advised that some reports are designed to fit within a specific area on a page. For example, an invoice or check format. Increasing or reducing these sections may cause inappropriate page breaks or forms to not line up correctly. Be careful when designing or modifying these types of reports. Crystal Reports provides the ability to create several different field types. Within either the Insert or View menus, depending on the version of Crystal Reports, find the Field Explorer option. Database fields refer to the fields stored in Accpac tables. The database fields were already discussed when first creating the report. Formula fields create a new field based on an existing database field or other formula. Parameter fields are used to dynamically select data based on a selection criteria or condition that is defined. For example, you want to print a report for a customer range, but the customer range changes often. Running total fields are used to generate progression totals for numeric type fields. For example, you want your customer statement to display a running total column that adds new invoices and subtracts payments as the documents are printed, so the customer can see where they stand at any point in time. Group name fields display those groups that currently exist in the report. Unlike other fields, they are not added here. They will automatically appear when groups are created. Special fields are generic that already exist within Crystal reports. These fields control common functions. For example, fields to display page numbers, dates, and report comments. Although not shown in this menu, Crystal Reports also allows text fields. Text fields are used to create titles, such as the column titles within the page header section. To define a text field, select Insert Text Object. Fields can also be combined within a text field. For example, in the Group Header section, let's say you want to print the customer name followed immediately by the text "is in" and then the country where the customer lives. Because customer names vary in length, you don't want a fixed number of spaces to appear before printing the text "is in." Therefore, combine them within one field. Select Text Object and place it within the Group Header section. Then enter the text "is in." Expand the field to a length sufficient to contain the fields to be added. The field length can be changed later if necessary. Then select the Field Explorer and drag the customer name field into the text box. Then drag the country code into the text box after the text. Preview the report and notice that the field is now dynamic, increasing and decreasing automatically based on the length of the customer's name. To change the characteristics of a field, possibly to change the font or include additional decimal places, highlight the field, right-click, and select Format Field. Some modifications can be made using the icons at the top of the window, such as making the field bold or changing the font. However, other modifications must be made by right-clicking on the field. When right-clicking a field, depending on the field type, a list of field choices is displayed. These include how the field can be formatted, the size and position of a field, as well as several others. Let's say you want to edit the customer name field that was moved up to the Group Header section and make it bold with an underline to match the customer number. Highlight the field, right-click, and select Format Field. As seen from the various tabs, the font can be changed, add or remove field borders, and on the Common tab, suppress the field from appearing, among many other commands. To make the field bold, select the Font tab and choose the Bold option. To make the field underlined, like the customer number field, select the Border tab and indicate to place a single line below the field. Several commands contain an X+2 button to the right. This button allows conditional formatting. For example, possibly you want to bold only those customers that live in Canada. More on this later.
Let's take a look at creating new reports in Crystal.